The opinions of the guests and host are their own and do not represent the opinions of IRONCLAD, the Border Patrol, or the Department of Homeland Security.
When they come back to Mexico after living their entire lives in the United States, right? Some of them, they don't speak Spanish because they came to the United States when they were maybe 3 or 4 years old, and that's all they know, right? They look different. So they become a target automatically. And then the word gets out that they're veterans, and cartels target them to get them to join their cartel, to train their cartel people for tactics. Not just them, but their families, right? Their families, more often than not, they stay in the United States. So they know that they can say, hey, we're gonna do something to your family if you don't work for us. And actually, most of them, they refuse to do so, and they try to avoid it, and they hide, and it's just they've been kidnapped because of that. The fact that we're deporting trained killers to countries that are at war or they have cartels or anything else, it blows my mind. It was like, you are deporting, you're throwing us out like trash, but we have a set of skills that you invested in, and we have to use those now to survive and to make sure that we don't become prey to the cartels.
We cut through the partisan talking points. We're not interested in perpetuating fear. We're interested in seeking truth, hearing what's really going on America's borderland. Welcome to Borderland, an IRONCLAD original. Today we're bringing you part one of a two-part series on a topic that deserves to finally get some light shed on it: deported veterans. This subject was brought to us in an interview early on when we started doing this show, and I had no idea the level that we are facing here in America and our deported veterans. It's a subject that, since hearing the first interview, I decided to try and bring on as many as we can to hear more and understand deeper into this subject, and how hopefully us talking about it on this show can bring more light to it. I had the pleasure of interviewing Danitza D. James. D is the Chief Executive Officer of Repatriate Our Patriots, ROP, a nonprofit organization dedicated to aiding in the repatriation of deported veterans and preventing future deportations. She is a combat veteran, having served in Iraq on 2 combat tours while holding a green card. Although she eventually received citizenship through being a military spouse, Dee's mission is to ensure no veteran ever finishes their time in service without receiving naturalization. Here's our conversation. So as we get started, do you mind if I call you Dee?
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
Awesome. So Dee, for the audience, people that are listening, I'd love for you to run down through a quick bio, however long you want to take, to be honest, a bio about yourself and your expertise, and then also leading into what you do today.
Yeah, thank you. So I was born and raised in Mexico, more specifically in Sonora, Mexico, right across the border in San Luis, Rio Colorado. And I was born there to immigrant parents who worked in the fields in Arizona and California. And in 1996, I received my green card. So at that time, once you receive your green card, you have to go to the States and attend high school there. So when I went to Yuma, Arizona to begin high school, and I couldn't speak English. I didn't understand English. And I could sing songs, and I could watch movies with the captions. I could sing songs in English, but I didn't know what I was saying, right? So no better way to learn than just to throw you right in. I graduated high school, and I did 1 year of college. After that, we couldn't afford college anymore. So I was like, all right, what's next? I definitely do not want to stay in Yuma, Arizona. There's nothing to do there. I wanted to see the world. And so I said, well, I'm going to join the military. And being that the Marines is the only base that is there, I tried to go join the Marines, but unfortunately they weren't there in the office. They must have been out coloring or something. I don't know. They must have had a coloring party that day, and they weren't in their office. And I'm one of those persons that, like, if I'm going to go and sign up for something, I better do it right then and there, or else I'm not coming back. So I looked down the hallway and the Air Force was there. And I was like, well, I'm not smart enough for the Air Force. AGT scores are not that high. The Navy, I was like, I do not like to be out on a boat for months at a time. And I do not look good in bell bottoms. So the Army it is, right? So the Army it was. I joined the Army in June of 2001. And citizenship was one of the things that the recruiter promised me and that I needed. So the other thing was, of course, college tuition. So I joined the Army as an ADA Mike, a truck driver. He promised me that I will be driving generals around and just hanging out, right? Well, I said, look, I don't care what I do. I just want to go to Germany, right? So he put that in my contract. And I said, I also want to jump out of planes. I was like, I want to be airborne. He's like, all right. So those were two things that were in my contract. And I went to basic training in South Carolina, and 9/11 happened. I had my life completely changed after that. We had not qualified on our weapons, and they gave us M16s, a magazine of rounds, and they said, go pull guard duty. So after that, my focus was not going to college or obtaining my citizenship. My focus was, holy shit, I'm going to war now. This is not part of my plan. So I went to Germany, and in 2003, I deployed to Iraq with my unit. We were a fuel company, so I was driving a 5,000-gallon fuel truck. And in March 13 of 2003, we crossed the berm into Iraq. We were setting up fuel points across Highway 1 for 3rd ID and the Marine Infantry Division to push forward. So little old girl from San Luis, Mexico, it's in the lead vehicle about to cross the berm into Iraq. And I was like, what in the hell am I doing here? So it was definitely an experience that has contributed to make me who I am today. We stayed in Iraq for a whole year in 2003. And towards the end of it, that's when they started doing naturalizations in Baghdad, right? So the ceremonies were at Saddam Hussein's castle, and they were being expedited. So I put in for my naturalization while I was in Iraq. Well, by the time my appointment came back and it said, all right, you have to come to Baghdad and do your ceremony, it was time for us to go back to Germany. So it was time for us to redeploy. And they said, oh, well, don't worry, we'll forward your paperwork to the consulate in Rome, and you can just go and do your citizenship there. So I was like, all right. So we went back to Germany. 3 months later, we got orders to redeploy again back to Iraq. Crazy. And and I happened to fall in this stop loss, right? So I had only signed up for a 4-year contract, and because of the deployments, we got extended for another year, and I deployed again to Iraq in 2005. Before my deployment back to Iraq, Rome sent a letter and said that I was scheduled to go to my naturalization ceremony in Rome. And again, I missed it. Nobody prioritized my naturalization at all. I could have easily done my citizenship ceremony and then joined the unit later on.
Yeah.
I mean, people were doing that for medical reasons or any other stuff, right? But naturalization wasn't just one of those. And honestly, now that I've learned some more, I really think it's because it did not impact the mission. Right. It didn't impact the mission that I was a citizen or not a citizen. Naturalized gave me a green card and I could do the job. That's it.
Right.
Had I had a cavity or something, maybe I would have stayed behind because
if you had a profile for a toothache, then maybe.
Yes. I didn't even think about it. I was like, oh my God, I should have just had a toothache and I could have stayed behind. But no, naturalization wasn't a thing. And I deployed again in 2005. This year, I was actually a 50 cal gunner. We were gun truck unit. We were escorting civilians and local nationals up and down the Iraq for supply deliveries. I suffered some injuries when I was there in 2005, and by the time I came back, I wanted out. Like I did not feel safe. It was a toxic environment, and honestly, my plan was not to leave the military. I wanted to do 20. I wanted to do Sergeant Major, all of those things, right? But after that second deployment, me leaving the military was a survival tactic. And I knew, I said, if I deploy again, I'm not coming back. So I left the military. I waived my 90 days reintegration, and I was out of the military and out of Germany in 60 days. I didn't do a VA claim. I didn't do an exam. I checked yes and no to everything on the checklist. And I found myself back in Fort Hood, Texas, with my husband, my fiance at the time. And I was out, and I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go visit my mom in Mexico. Well, when I looked for my green card, it was expired.
Oh my gosh, now you're out of status.
Now I'm out of status, right? A combat veteran, out of status, struggling with PTSD, over medicating, alcohol, like you name it. I was going down the road of, not doing well. Definitely a recipe for disaster. But thankfully, my husband was in the military, and I was able to apply for my naturalization as a military spouse. So a year later, I naturalized in 2007. And then after that, I just continued to serve the military community, military spouses, wounded veterans, and I've been doing this ever since. But in 2019, I found out that veterans were being deported. And now I got out in 2006. In 2019 was the first time I ever heard about the immigration law that if you commit a felony, you could be deported. I had no idea about that. Nobody ever told me. Nobody checked. What the long checklist did not have a question about, hey, you did not apply for your naturalization. You want to do it before you leave? We promised it. So I had no idea. Once I found out that was happening, I couldn't look away. I couldn't look away. I'm a social worker by trade. And I was like, what do you mean? Like this, I was like, I could have been one of those. And that's something that I still struggle with, because I could have been that I would have done. That's always like something that, and I don't know, I'm guilty of this, right? When you have a service member that is like, oh yeah, I was going to deploy, but I didn't. And they got all these stories, right? And as a combat veteran, I was like, wait, but you didn't. You're not a combat veteran, right? So I struggle with the fact that I could have been a deported veteran, but I'm not, right? So when I'm interacting with these guys and gals, they're like, oh, you should share your story. You're connected to this. I was like, yeah, but I was never deployed. They're like, it doesn't matter.
No, I get where you're coming from on that, but there's so much to unpack just on this part of your story. We haven't even got into the meat and potatoes of what I want to talk about. For those who are listening who don't know, the 88 mic is a job that people sign up for but don't realize what they're getting into. During the time when she was in Iraq were some of the most dangerous roads ever. Those are the roads that were traveled. More people were killed from IEDs than you could even count. We could look at the numbers. It is the most dangerous MOS. And they're not taught to be combat effective like an Army Ranger in my unit. They're taught to drive a load from point A to point B in some of the worst terrain possible. And they have very little support. So in 2 years of you doing that alone, I have nothing but respect for you and your team, and your platoons who are doing that mission. You were probably bringing supplies to me. You were probably bringing supplies to other units. Is what you were doing is supporting other units so they can stay deep in the fight. But while you're driving in these areas that are, it's the most challenging times. I know how people have lost their lives to IEDs throughout this whole, OIF and OEF, and so I feel for you in the fact that your job, what you did, was serving this country. But what I also understand is how you were serving this country with a green card, not even a citizen of the country. And no one made your citizenship, your naturalization process a priority. They were willing to see you die if had to and never become a citizen. that to me is a frustration that I have in hearing about this topic. This topic for me is sensitive because of, well, not just my background, but what I think is fair, but also I've gone to war, right? I've served this country.
Yep.
And anyone who has like signed that dotted line and volunteered and actually sent to war, man, I have nothing but respect for. I don't care what the job is. It could be a cook, 88 Mike, 42 Alpha supply. It don't matter what it is. For me, is if you're willing to serve this country, that says a lot about you. But on the other aspect, if you're willing to serve this country and you're not even a citizen yet, like it should be us on the military side, do everything we can to grant you that as in like a thank you. Thank you for supporting this nation. Thank you for supporting this mission. This is not a fight that you necessarily need to be in, but you're volunteering for it. And so for me, I have a lot of frustrations with that already. Yeah. And then just like you, I didn't hear about deported veterans and probably around the same time frame. Probably 2020 is probably when I heard from it. And when I heard from it was guys like Nick, right? A mutual friend of ours who's out there, serving the people, traveling to these veterans and finding ways of helping them, counter their claims or find lawyers or representation to help fight it. For those of you listening there or watching, veterans who've served this nation in combat and who never got the chance to get their citizenship are deported for a felony. And these crimes consist of many different things, right? It could be something as bad as murder, right? Okay, that's a different story. And then there's some that are domestic violence. There's some that are drinking. There's all these different little cases. But for the most part, if any of those were United States citizens, well, then they'd be handled in a United States court and they'd be, delivering their punishment in the United States. But since they're not citizens yet, they've not been granted the opportunities to finalize their naturalization process. They're deported back to a country that they never fought for. They're deported back to a country they probably don't even recognize. They probably don't have family members at times, And so that for me is like been the biggest frustration of this topic to hear about it, And so I think your story does have value. I think your story has a lot more value than you think, even though you were never deported. But you're someone who comes from, you come from Mexico. You've seen your family's hard work and you chose to become, get a green card in this country, the country that you believed in, your family believed in, it supported it supported your family. And then you chose to serve the country for college money, just like I did. Right? I was like, well, I'm not going to be able to pay for college anyways, Yeah. And then it completely changed on you. You were there during 9/11. I wasn't. I joined after. I was playing college baseball and watching, and I was like, maybe not yet. You know what I mean? Maybe not yet.
Let's see how things turn out.
Yeah. And so I think your story is very powerful. And we haven't even gotten into what you do now. Okay. But so I just want to let you know, like, I have nothing but respect for you and for the many that are like you, that serve this country. And I hate the fact that it's so challenging to get naturalized. It stresses me out, really. One of the questions I have is do you know what the numbers of deported veterans currently, just a roundabout number?
So there's currently no government organization that is tracking, successfully and accurately tracking how many deported veterans there've been. Among the several veteran organizations that we have, right, we estimate somewhere about over 1,000. We on our database have close to 400 that we can account for with location, ages, all of those things. But that is another struggle, right? That we have not been able to get clear data. We don't know how many are out there. Those who we know of that we have actually information for have found out about us by word of mouth, by Facebook, Instagram, social media. A friend of a friend told them, they heard in the news, right? And I gotta tell you, when I was in Iraq and we were more often than not, we'll sit on the highway, right? Just for hours waiting for an IED to be cleared.
Yeah.
And as the lead gunner of a gun truck, I'm sitting there and one thing, I'm hot, I'm thirsty. I probably got to go to the bathroom. And then another thought is, well, what happens if I get kidnapped? What happens if I get captured here? I'm not even a U.S. citizen. Like, will they negotiate for me or will they just say, oh, well, we don't know where she's at or she died? So those were some of the thoughts that came across my mind when I was sitting there, either waiting for an IDD to be cleared, or when we were hit with an ID and we doing medevacs, right? Or sitting in the middle of a town, crowded town, with buildings all around you, everybody looking at you, and people look at me weird because they recognize that I'm a female. And just to be fighting for a country, right, that is, I'm not even a citizen of. Nobody ever asked me, none of my buddies asked me, hey, are you a US citizen, right? Before they had my back. I never asked them, well, I'm not a US citizen, right? I have your back. I actually am the lead vehicle. I will make sure you get there and come back alive, right? And it was never asked. We all bleed red, and we were all wearing the same flag on our shoulder. And that, as you were talking about this, right? And yeah, we all have our role in the military. And at the end of the day, as we signed that dotted line, and I was good enough to die for this country, but not good enough to live in this country or to be a citizen of this country. And that is something that, to me, I just couldn't look away. The work that I currently do, I've been doing this since 2019 when I found out this was going on. And I have learned a lot. I have never thought that I will be learning about immigration laws, learning about legislation, all of these things, right? But here I am. And I feel that my journey has taken me full circle. Came from an immigrant family from Mexico, right? Joined the military, served this country in combat, got out, continued to serve the military just out of uniform, work for an organization that cares for wounded veterans and their families, followed by work for an organization that cares for the families of the fallen. And then I began to learn about this, right? So I have come full circle to now I'm helping those from who I came from and serving those who I became, right? So for me, I was like, I'm not going anywhere. I know this is a marathon, but this is where I'm going to be until something changes. And Repatriate Our Patriots is a nonprofit organization that focuses and is committed to help veterans who are deported come back and be reintegrated into the communities that they were taken from. But at the same time, we want to make sure that the bleeding is stopped. We want to make sure that there's no more veterans deported. We want to make sure that this is not happening anymore. And we also want to help the veterans reintegrate, be successful, get the care that they need, go to college, have jobs, reconnect with their families, and feel like they're part of this country again. So Nick is one of the veterans that he's our boots on the ground. He's out of the organizations that are doing this work. We are the only organization that have somebody that travels outside of the country to meet these veterans where they're at. And I literally meet them where they're at. If they're homeless, he's there with them, right? If they're in a hospital, he's there with them. And more often than not, he is the only contact they ever had since they were deported with somebody that they can relate to, meaning a veteran.
I was jumped a few years ago at a gas station. What are some easy to use self-defense techniques?
What is the most cost-effective way to make sure my home is secure?
What would happen if there was a global internet or cellular outage? What is your suggestion for comms?
What should I do if I hear shots ringing out?
Or what I should do if there's a major terrorist attack.
How is your faith tied in to being a protector?
Is there a moral case for taking a life?
What is your recommendation on critical EDC?
What should I have? What's the best?
What should I do?
What does that look like?
What would you recommend? Is there anything I could do?
Is there any policies that would in the future protect our veterans from being deported? You would think that there should be something where if you're if you have a green card, if you, and you join the military, there should be some kind of policies. If you graduate basic training, then we naturalize something. I know I was a drill sergeant. I was a drill sergeant out of Fort Sill. And one of my classes that we graduated, I didn't understand the process of what was happening on the back end. I just heard about it. And so when we graduated, these kids, 3 of them got naturalization papers that day. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I blew it off. Didn't even know. I had no idea. But that was, that's 2010, 2011, a little later on. Maybe it changed, but I think every situation is kind of different. But is there any policy that's potentially in place right now that we can protect anyone who serves this country and help them get their naturalization papers first before they start going to war or anything else?
Currently, there's not. They have started back in 2018. They started a program that is called MAVNI, and that's when they began the naturalizations at basic training. Right. There is also when our military was in need of special skills, meaning linguist or cyber, computer, medical. Right. And they began to bring in immigrants who were not U.S. citizens, but they meet the requirement of what the need was. Right now, I know for sure that the Air Force and the Navy have a MOU, Memorandum of Agreement, with USCIS, that what they're doing is they're processing their application, their fingerprints, everything that is needed for their naturalization when they arrive at basic training, and upon graduation, they also swear in and they get naturalized. But that is not a permanent policy. That is something that is happening because guess what? Our numbers are low.
Yeah.
And actually, delivering the promise that we make at recruiting, meaning becoming naturalized, right? It's pretty good for recruiting. And unfortunately, there is nothing that is permanent. There is nothing that someone can just say, well, all right, well, we met our quota, we're good, let's just stop doing this. And that's what we're fighting for. We're fighting for this to be directed by Congress, and accepted by DOD, right? So that there is no precedent, whether it's a left or a right, that can come in and say, no, never mind, let's get rid of that, because that has happened in the past. And that's where our service members fall through the cracks. In addition to that, we also want the military to take responsibility and be accountable for delivering on their promise. We want to make sure that the Department of Defense sees us as more than just a number, that they at least track our naturalization as good and as hard as they track late fees on government travel cards. Because every command and staff, there is a meeting and they have a spreadsheet that tells you how many people are behind 30 days, 60 days late on their credit card, and they better make sure that they get it fixed, right? But they just have not made it a priority to have a list of how many non-U.S. citizens we have in the company, in the battalion, the brigade, and what's the status of their naturalization. It's such a simple fix, right? Yeah. It literally does not take an act of Congress to fix this issue. And it's just not a priority. And until it impacts the mission, then that's when we see things happening. It's just as we're doing now, naturalizations at basic training, right? Because it's impacting the mission because we don't have the numbers.
Yeah, no, I agree. What is your organization, ROP? What do you guys do to help and assist veterans? What's the process like?
Yeah, so for us, it's outreach. For us is outreach, communicating and networking with VAs, with local organizations like the BFW, American Legion, and other community services, right, on the work that we're doing. Why are we here? What is the problem? What is the issue? So basically educating the community. And outreach, such as the work that Nick does, right, out where the veterans are at, it has really been very impactful because these are veterans that are 60, 70 years old, and they may not have a computer. They don't know how to fill out a form on the internet or even to navigate their application for VA benefits. And the outreach that we've been able to do to connect them to pro bono attorneys, and to connect them to the VA so that they can even begin to see a light of hope has been tremendous. So that is where we put most of our time on the outreach.
So when they get deported, they're still going to be allowed to receive their veteran benefits of some capacity, depending on the severity of their incident, correct?
Yeah. And so if they're lucky, they probably applied for VA benefits before they were deported and they got some kind of rating, right? And I say if they're lucky because really, if it's hard in the United States to get a claim approved and actually get a compensation out of it, imagine in Mexico, imagine in El Salvador, imagine trying to find a doctor that can say, yes, you're back, you have bad back because of your service, and then have that been accepted by the VA is extremely challenging, right? So what we're doing right now is we're dependent of their age, we see if they qualify for pension, because that at least will give them some money to be able to eat and put a roof over their head. And the main thing is connect them to an attorney so that they can review their case and say, hey, yes, we can represent you. There's a chance that we can bring you back on humanitarian parole.
Yeah. It's just crazy. You know, I've been looking a lot into immigration law, and a thought kind of crazy is becoming an immigration lawyer for things like this. That's how stressed this subject gets me. It's like, if you go to war with me, man, I'm going to fight for you. You know what I mean? No matter what, you know, in harsh terrains in our own country, whatever I have to do. But it's a frustrating topic. It pisses me off, to be honest. You said that deported veterans that are living in like Mexican border cities like Tijuana are at great risk due to heavy cartel presence. Yeah. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that threat is real and it happens every day. When they come back to Mexico after living their entire lives in the United States, right? Some of them, they don't speak Spanish because they came to the United States when they were maybe 3 or 4 years old, and that's all they know, right? They look different. So they become a target automatically. And then the word gets out that they're veterans. And cartels target them to get them to join their cartel, to train their cartel people for tactics, you know, for firearms, for any tactics to do the work that cartels do. And we actually had one of our veterans who was in Tijuana, who was kidnapped by the cartels. And he was lucky to be able to escape. And we had to relocate him from Tijuana to Juarez. And right now he's in the United States on a humanitarian parole. But because he had that set of skills, he became something that they needed. Yeah. And not just them, but their families, right? Their families, more often than not, they stay in the United States. So they know that they can say, hey, we're going to do something to your family if you don't work for us. And also, you don't have any money, you don't have nowhere to live, you don't have anything on how to survive, right? So they're like, yeah, we're going to pay you X amount of money if you come train our cartels, right? And actually most of them, they refuse to do so, and they try to avoid it, and they hide, and it's just they've been kidnapped because of that. So the fact that we're deporting trained killers to countries that are at war or they have cartels or anything else, it blows my mind. It was like, you are deporting, you're throwing us out like trash, but we have a set of skills that you invested in. And we have to use those now to survive and to make sure that we don't become prey to the cartels.
Oh my goodness. What is some of the ways have you been able to get some of these veterans back to America? Has there been any success in that?
We have, thanks to the work that the organizations on the ground are doing, and the initiative that President Biden and the Secretary of the VA formed in 2021, we have been able to bring back 91 veterans.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. However, there's a but in this. Out of those 91 veterans, we don't know how many are here with legal status, permanent legal status, how many are here on a 1-year humanitarian parole only, waiting to see what happens with their criminal case. And we don't know how many are here as U.S. citizen, right? And that's extremely challenging.
Yeah, can you explain to me the humanitarian parole?
Yeah, so humanitarian parole is something that pro bono attorneys work for them, which gives them a year. And these are usually granted because either health conditions or fear or threat in their communities where they live, right? So they are brought back on humanitarian paroles. More than usually is for a year long. And they, at that time, they're able to work with their attorneys to work on their criminal case, to hopefully find a way so that they can obtain legal permanent residence, or even in some cases, U.S. citizenship. At the 90-day point before this paroles get become expired, they can apply for an extension. But not all of those are approved. And it can take up to anywhere between 3 to 4 months before they're even approved. And that's where right now it's, we have several veterans who are here in the United States with a expired humanitarian parole, and one of them in Texas.
Really?
So humanitarian parole is great because we can begin helping them with the VA benefits, right? Helping them get healthcare. And they're back in the United States. They're safe. They have a roof over their heads.
So they're carrying an active visa, and it's there for humanitarian purposes, right? It's a humanitarian visa, I imagine. And so at that point, they could apply for all their veteran benefits as possible. Am I correct? If someone commits a certain kind of crime, then they're not allowed to receive their veteran benefits, or is that incorrect? Is it, if they've gone out on honorable terms, they will always be allowed to get their benefits? Is that correct?
So they are not allowed to receive their benefits while they're incarcerated.
While they're incarcerated. Got it.
Correct.
So deported, they're fine.
Yes. We have veterans who are 100% permanent in total, and they are receiving their deposit to whatever bank there is in their country, either Mexico, Salvador, or wherever. Cool. It's just a wire transfer.
I have a connection to a law firm that helps veterans get their VA benefits. Let's connect later, and I'll connect you directly to them, to the owner of that. And then maybe they can do some pro bono work for you guys as well and help. I'll connect that call for you, okay, later.
Thank you.
With your organization, I think what most people think about, they think about only like, your Mexicans, maybe Honduras, maybe Guatemalans, but is there other countries that are involved in your organization that you guys are helping with? Maybe, I don't know, Haitians or whatnot. I mean, is there other countries that, could you name some of those countries so we can kind of identify that in our head?
Yeah, we have veterans deported all across the world. And this is a misconception that a lot of people often think that it's just Hispanics, right?
Yeah.
Or Central America. And it's not. We have veterans deported to Haiti, to Jamaica, we have them in the UK. We actually have a veteran in the UK right now. We have them in Canada. We have them in Trinidad, and really all over the place.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just thought of it now. I have some notes here from some of my questions. I was like, wait a minute, like there's gotta be other countries. And so all of those fall under your organization, as in you guys are trying to help all of those individuals either find a way back or at least get some, their veteran benefits and whatnot.
Yes. We don't have like a specific nationality that we focus on. We help, if you're a service member, if you're a veteran, we're going to help you. And there is an organization that's called Black Deported Veterans of America.
Okay.
They focus on the African American population, specifically because of the misconception, right? That it's only Hispanics. In Africa, often African Americans get left out. So they have made it their mission to focus and do outreach to the African American countries where there may be veterans who they don't even know that they have a chance to come back.
I would love a contact to them, to talk to them as well. I think it's important. I think it's easy for, the average citizen to think all Mexicans, you know what I mean? Or all Hispanic or whatever. It's probably the easy idea, but then to Jamaica. Whoa, never
Yeah.
Canada. What? I never thought about that. I had a friend when I was in Ranger Battalion. He defected from Cuba, and he joined.
Okay.
And I don't know what his status was at that time. Never thought about it. Like I said, it wasn't a thought process to us. And so to hear this story is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
Is there, for those people who are listening, is there anything that we can do? Is there places we should donate, organizations we should, what is it that anyone listening and watching this can actually help and support this mission?
Yeah. Right now, every nonprofit that is doing this work, we don't have access to any of the grants that the government has put out there because we don't really meet their requirements. We support a population that is not in the United States, and that we have to do international work to provide our services, right? So anyone who's listening can donate to Repatriate Our Patriots. We have a link on our website, repatriateourpatriots.org. And we operate as a coalition. If another organization is having a need or for support for another veteran, right, we step in if we have the funds to support them. So that is one of the organizations. I know Black Deported Veterans of America also has a link to where they can donate on their website. And honestly, just really, how would I say? Just learning more about it, right? This opportunity that you're giving us in your podcast to talk about this issue, to really change the narrative of what is currently out there, right? That they're all criminals, that we're all from Mexico, that we should have known better, that we should have, done that when we were in, it's our fault. No, there's a multitude of things that can happen on why someone was not able to obtain their naturalization when they were in service. I'm a prime example of that, right? And at the same time is they don't have access to the healthcare they've earned. They don't have access to the benefits that they've earned. And that is something that we struggle with all the time. We say suicide comes up on conversations every time we speak with them.
Yeah.
And it's such a challenging conversation because we couldn't even give them a 1-800 number to call when they were in suicidal crisis, right? So any donations that are made to our organization or any organization that does this work, it goes 100% back to them. We're all volunteer at Repatriate Our Patriots. We're 90% veterans, and the 2 that are not veterans, we have crowned them veterans just because of the work that they're doing. And yeah, all the proceeds go back to them.
Doing this podcast, I find that people who are immigrants to America are probably the most patriot individuals of America. The continued belief in America and the American system. And that to me is always inspiring. I wish there were Americans who were born here had the same views on America. Yeah. What I want to kind of close this out with is 2 things. One, I want to let you know that anything I can do in the assistance of your organization, I'll be there, even if it's to go to DC. I will speak, I will talk, I will do whatever I have to continue to bring attention to this subject. If you need me to travel, we'll make it work. I believe in helping veterans because what a lot of people probably listening and watching may seem to forget is that veterans who have gone overseas and come back and don't have the same support system as a lot of us do, find themselves lost and losing a battle with trying to assimilate into America. It's not easy. Us Americans have trouble assimilating to America. It's a struggle to assimilate to civilian culture. Now you're saying that they're not a citizen and they make one mistake, maybe a drinking mistake, maybe a fight at a bar, all due to the fact that they're drinking probably because of post-traumatic stress issues. There's so many ways to unpack this, and I think the average person probably doesn't give it the thought that they should. I think bringing this conversation to light on this podcast is important because this is a border podcast, and part of this is about, the American experience, but also the immigrant experience in America. This is something that I want to continue to highlight. It's unfair for us to have someone go to war for this country, to serve this country, just same in the magnitude of you have 2 years. You served more time overseas than I have, ma'am. You know, and to tell you, like, I have nothing but respect for anyone who's, I get emotional and frustrated. This subject just gets me. You've served this country, and this country didn't serve you in the way they should have. I apologize. I'll continue to fight for this subject because I find it unfair. And I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for your dedication to this country, even though this country hadn't been as gracious as you have been to them. Thank you for your continued dedication to our brothers and sisters in uniform. Thank you for what you do. And thank you for your organization for continuing to push this conversation out there. Again, I'll use my platforms all I can to help. I'm just infuriated that this is even happening currently in our nation. Anything I can do to help, I'll connect you with all my resources. But again, thank you. And I apologize for getting emotional about this. I'm just very frustrated to hear that our brothers and sisters who have served this country are not getting the support they deserve. And there are people in this country who can't acknowledge that, who've never served time, never decided to defend this nation, but then can say rude comments as like they should have known better, or, well, they should have got the help, or whatever their argument might be. It's not enough. And I'm just frustrated. So thank you for your time, ma'am, and I apologize for my unprofessionalism and emotions.
Don't apologize. And I'll tell you this, and I know I'm not alone in this feeling. If I have to do it all over again, I will. And I would. And this country has given me more than I will ever be able to give back, even with my service, even with my continued commitment to my fellow brothers and sisters. And I am who I am today, and I have the capacity to continue to fight because that's what the military trained me to do. Not ever leave a veteran behind. And our brothers and sisters have been left behind, and I'm just not able to move past that. And don't apologize for your emotion. It shows, right, that you know what it is to serve this country. You know what it is to trust your buddy to your left and to your right and behind you, to know that they have your back, regardless of their citizenship. We never ask that. That's not a question that we go around asking. So thank you for giving us this platform and for your commitment, to continue to support this topic in our organization. And we'll be here for a long time. Hopefully not that long, but yes.
Anything you need, ma'am, I'm here for you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Borderland and Ironclad Original. See you next time.